On November 6, 2020, at around 3:30 a.m., there was what appeared to be a scuffle between two men outside of a downtown Atlanta hookah lounge. That small scuffle soon escalated when a third man hopped out of a white car on the scene and began firing shots. This prompted officers that were sitting outside of the lounge to also open fire. There was a crowd of people that had gathered outside of the lounge, and they were running and screaming, desperately trying to escape the gunfire. This early morning shootout left 3 people injured and 3 people dead, one of which was 26-year-old drill rapper Dayvon Bennett, who you might know as King Von. The loss of this amazingly talented artist caused many people to start deep diving into King Von's past, just trying to piece together the life of a man whose music shot him to the top, but who we barely knew anything about. This spark of interest led to the unveiling of many secrets, including the fact that he was allegedly connected to about 11 murders, some of which he himself wrote detailed songs and tweets about, and this prompted people to start to wonder if King Von was really rap's first serial killer. Hi, my name is Tasha, and this is my series White Rabbit, where we deep dive into anything spooky, odd, or just interesting while I apply some special effects makeup. Before we get anywhere in today's story, I would like to make it very, come closer, very clear. Pay attention! Everything in this video, almost everything in this video, is alleged. King Von is not here to defend himself, and although it is quite possible that charges would have been filed on him, and many people have what a lot of us would consider to be evidence.
How juicy is it? How juicy is it?
The bottom line is we don't know, so everything is alleged, even if I don't say it, allegedly. Consider this a gossip session with a few receipts while I do some makeup. Speaking of makeup, today's makeup is inspired by King Von's song Demon, which is on his 2020 album Welcome to O Block. If you're interested in what I used to make this video possible, I will link everything in the description below. And if you're interested in how I made these horns for today's look, I will leave a card somewhere. Please remember to subscribe if you like this type of content. I am at 396 subscribers right now, and my goal is to make it to 500, and I need you for that.
Come on, man!
You don't have to, but I would love for you to. I am so happy and humbled that there are 396 of you who enjoy my content, and I enjoy creating that content. So if you haven't subscribed and you want to, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't leave. Hit the button. So I won't continue to ramble. I know why you're here, and we are going to jump in right now with the history of King Von. Dayvon Daquan Bennett was born August 4th, 1994 on the south side of Chicago. His parents were Natasha Chambers, I believe she goes by Taisha, and Walter Bennett, and he went by Silk. He grew up in the city's infamous Parkway Gardens, also known as O Block, and this is on the 6400 block of Martin Luther King Drive. This neighborhood, the same neighborhood that gave us Michelle Obama, is also known as one of Chicago's deadliest neighborhoods. Parkway Gardens is a 694-unit housing complex, and it was built in the 1950s to help with the housing shortage during the Great Migration. If you didn't know, the Great Migration took place between 1910 and 1970, and during this time, over 6 million African Americans migrated from southern states to the northern states. They migrated to northern and midwestern states, and this was to escape racial prejudice, Jim Crow laws. They just wanted a better life. In doing so, many of them traded in one set of problems for another, because in response to the Great Migration, northern states started to implement what is called redlining. The Homeowners Lending Corporation, or HOLC, created a set of maps. And these maps were color-coded. Green neighborhoods meant they were cream of the crop. The best schools, the best houses, safest areas. Blue neighborhoods were still pretty good. There were a lot of white-collar families working there. Still pretty good school districts and relatively safe. Then you get to the yellow neighborhoods. And yellow actually meant that the neighborhood was on decline. These were really, really hardworking families just trying to stay afloat, essentially. The red districts were the worst. They had the highest crime rate. They were normally reserved for people of color or very low class poor whites. There was violence everywhere, poverty, terrible school system, lack of policing. So what they did is they started denying loans and mortgages to Black people unless they were inside of those red line districts. It was a way of segregation without saying that it was segregation. Simultaneously, white Americans fled from the red-lined areas to different suburbs that were popping up everywhere. They were going wherever the Black people couldn't go. On top of all of this, most of the industries that were supplying jobs to the area at the time started to disappear. And in turn, the number of impoverished increased. The landlords became slumlords. The city put zero effort into the upkeep of these neighborhoods. Everything went to hell for this community, and they thought they were leaving the South to come to a better life. Parkway Gardens was built in one of these red line districts specifically to house the African American population. This is where King Von got his start. As a child, Von didn't have much of a relationship with his father. Before I go any further than that, look at these two. Look at these two. Are they not the same human? Anyway, Silk was a very respected, high-ranking member of the Black Disciples, BD. He was considered one of the most powerful, influential members of the community. Allegedly, he made a lot of money selling drugs, and between the drug activity and the gang activity, it was inevitable that Silk would spend a lot of time in jail, which he did. Silk was locked up for a great deal of Von's childhood, all the way up until the time Von was like 7 or 8. Even then, Von spoke very highly of his father. He later referenced him in his music, saying that that's the older him. But unfortunately, when Von was only 11 years old, Silk sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the head. Some say it was just a sniper's headshot that killed Silk. A more popular story is that Silk had stolen some drugs from someone, and a close friend of his actually double-crossed him and gave his location to the dealer that he had stole from. So it was drug-related revenge. We don't know 100%, but what we do know is that the death of Silk greatly impacted King Von. He would often state in interviews and in tweets, he would write it in his music, that after his father passed, he just couldn't sleep anymore. This leads me to wonder if he was dealing with some kind of like insomnia that was triggered by his father's death. I also saw an interview with King Von, and he was saying that one day he just woke up and he was bad. He was just attracted to bad shit. All of a sudden, he was like drawn to it. He was saying it in a way like, I don't know why I became bad. Just one day I was just drawn to this thing. But I wonder if losing his father at least played a part in him becoming this bad kid. I mean, he ended up living almost a mirrored life to the life that his father lived. Von was affiliated with the Black Disciples just like his father was. His whole complex was BD. But he attended school with members of rival gangs. Initially, the furthest it went with confrontation between the rival gangs was just like scuffles, fistfights. King Von himself escalated the violence in the school when he was the first one to start carrying a gun. After word got out that King Von was carrying a gun to school, pretty much everyone else fell in line and also started carrying guns. I mean, no one wants to be the only one without protection. Imagine being that kid. I mean, it's understandable that growing up surrounded in violence, you would want to feel some sort of safety. It's the reason that so many of his friends, family, associates, they were all heavily involved in gang activity. It wasn't just that it offered another level of safety, but several people have been quoted in saying that it wasn't a choice in this neighborhood if you were going to be affiliated or not. Either you participate or you don't come outside. If you wanted to leave the house without being jumped, robbed, shot at, you were participating. And even then, those things still happen to you, but at least you weren't on your own. You had a group of people that were going to protect you. King Von's first arrest was when he was 16 years old. It was actually 2 days before his 17th birthday. He was charged with armed robbery, and he was offered 21 to 45 years as a plea deal. Is that a deal? I would have been like, is this a deal? You're gonna have to come better than this. I mean, I understand that it was armed robbery, but he was 16 and it was his first offense, and 21 to 45 years? Obviously, he didn't take it. He ended up doing some boot camp program instead, but that didn't really change anything either, because as soon as he finished the program and he was let out, Vaughn was back to doing the same things that got him locked up in the first place. The very next year, he got arrested for essentially the same thing. It was armed robbery with a firearm, but this time he was not so lucky as to get a boot camp program. He spent over a year in jail. Okay, so at this point in the video, we have to do a little gang history. Mostly because I want you to fully understand the beef that is ingrained into this community. I want you to understand how serious it is and how far back it goes. So we're gonna go back in time. I promise it's important and I think it's interesting. Okay, so remember how I was talking about during the Great Migration, a lot of businesses were leaving or they were failing on the south side of Chicago. They knew they were in trouble, but they didn't exactly know how hard this would hit Chicago. Between 1970 and 1996, the city would lose over 300,000 industrial jobs. They lost them to international competition, but they also lost jobs to southern states because in the South, these companies could get work for a lot cheaper. But the community associated the loss of jobs with the fact that so many Black people had migrated to Chicago. So the local whites who couldn't just up and flee like some of their brethren, they were really frustrated, and the city actually did not give a damn. So they dealt with their frustrations by harassing the Black community. Because of this, some of the local young Black men got together and they formed these gangs as a way to defend themselves. They wanted to fight back. They wanted to have a little power themselves. Okay, so this is where it gets confusing, but hopefully my watered down version is less confusing than what I consumed. Okay, so one of these gangs that was formed was called the Black Disciples, BD. The leader of this group was a 14-year-old boy named David Barksdale, also known as King David. So King David set up BD headquarters around 63rd, and then he just started to expand his gang. At that same time, there was another gang led by Larry Hoover, and this gang was called the Supreme Gangsters. Very long and actually interesting story short, Larry Hoover of the GDs and King David of the BDs were like ultimate ops at one point. The beef ran really deep, but somehow over time they ended up forming an alliance. That alliance lasted until King David died and Larry Hoover went to prison. The BDs under King David still had festering feelings from before the alliance, so once King David died, they started feeling really froggy. They did not respect Larry Hoover. They did not respect his men, not the way that they respected King David. The group splintered, and the men that were under King David went back to just being BDs, and the Supreme Gangsters became known as GDs. They were under Larry Hoover. Okay, so they've separated again. They basically went to war and remained evermore. Ultimate ops again. The two groups just started going tit for tat for murders. And all of this happening with them living walking distance from each other. They're on 63rd and 64th. So let's bring this story a little more current and talk about the public murder of a young boy whose name would become one of the most disrespected names in drill rap. January 12th, 2011, 15-year-old Shondell Gregory, also known as Tuka, was waiting outside for a bus. He was on a bus stop on 63rd when someone pulled up, hopped out of a dark colored vehicle and just began shooting. Tuka was hit 4 times and he died at the scene. Now the GDs were based off of 63rd and Lawrence. I don't know if it's still the same way now, but that's how it was at the time. So they called themselves the STL Boys, and they had an alliance with a group from 64th and Eberhard, and they were known as EBT. The members of this alliance began calling themselves STL EBT. Okay, so this was their friend, and he had been gunned down right on their block. There were a lot of people that took this loss hard. Apparently, he wasn't some hardened gang member. He didn't really do anything to anyone, but technically he was a member of STL EBT. Tuka was seen hanging out with known gang members, so to his rivals, that's all they needed to see. In honor of Tuka, STLEBT renamed their territory Tukaville. One of the people really affected by the loss of Tuka was Jakira Barnes, aka K.I. If you don't know who K.I. is, let me tell you, Miss K.I. is infamous. There's a show, I believe it's called Life of a Gang Girl, but they have an episode on K.I. and I would highly recommend you watch it. It gives a more in-depth look into the life of a 14-year-old girl who was a known shooter, K.I. the assassin. I'm going to give you a brief history on K.I. because she is important in the story and she will come up later. K.I. was born January 21st, 1997 in Chicago, Illinois. She was raised solely by her mother after losing her father to gun violence as a toddler. K.I. led a relatively normal life right up into the point that she got to high school, which is when we all lose our minds, am I right? Just me? Okay. High school is when K.I. started spending less time in school and more time hanging outside on 63rd. She started to really bond with members of STLEBT and she spent all of her time with her gang. She devoted herself to the gang. And during this time is when she became really close with Tuka. One of the things that Tuka's friends did to honor him after his passing was that when they were smoking the devil's lettuce, they would say that they were smoking on Tuka. Now this reference came from Tupac and the Outlaws. So if you didn't know, when Tupac was killed, at his request, his friends rolled him up into a joint and they smoked him. It's like the ultimate form of bonding, I guess. So anyway, Tukaville originated that phrase, smoking on Tuka. But soon the Beaties would steal that phrase and they would say smoking on Tuka as a way of mocking not only Tuka's death, but also as a way of mocking those that were mourning him. The Beaties in Parkway Gardens, which was actually known as Wick City at the time, they do a lot of name changes, but they were really loud on social media about Tuka's death. They were rubbing it in tweet after tweet after tweet. Everybody in Tukaville knew who killed him. Allegedly, one of the shooters was a Wick City member named O.D. Perry. O.D. Perry had been pictured on social media posing with this long-barreled silver gun. It was a revolver. Witnesses to the murder of Tuka reported that a long-barreled silver revolver was used in his murder. It wasn't too hard to put two and two together. And K.I. was definitely putting the pieces together. After Tuka's death, K.I. went to one of her older cousins who was more deeply ingrained in the gang life, and she asked him if he could teach her how to handle a gun. Apparently, or allegedly, her cousin taught young members of the gang how to shoot, like that was his specialty, teaching kids how to murder. Real cool guy. It was said that K.I. was a really good student. Only did she enjoy shooting, but she was really good at it. She became a known shooter. And it takes a certain amount of bravery to be a shooter. You can't be scary. And K.I. was brave almost to the point of stupidity, in my humble opinion, as a non-shooter, non-gang member. She did things like tweeting her location or walking alone in the ops neighborhoods at night. She did not have fear. At least that's what she wanted us all to think. If I had a group of humans on this earth whose main goal in life was to murder me, I don't know that I'd be dropping locations. On one hand, I understand not wanting to live in fear, but on the other hand, it's like, when does the self-preservation kick in? The point I'm getting at is that K.I. became a formidable opponent to have. She channeled her rage into her aim, and rumor has it that she was even taking paid hits. She was known as K.I. the female assassin. It's believable. I think her Twitter has paid hitter somewhere in it. And down the line, some inboxes ended up getting released, and it was basically her talking to someone else, going back and forth, negotiating the payment of a hit. I do want to interject something a little bit off topic right now. I'm going to jump off of the timeline. I'm not going to discuss every single murder that King Von was rumored to have been a part of. I'm not going to discuss all the friends of his that were murdered. It's too much back and forth and tit for tat, and at some point the story has to end, okay? So I'm just going to focus on the ones that I felt like were really important to my story today. Okay, back to the story. About 7 months after Tuka's death, the whole neighborhood was getting together to celebrate his birthday. There was also a local rapper that was shooting a video. His name is FBG Duck. So basically the entire STL-EBT neighborhood was out for this music video and for Tuka's birthday. Picture like a massive block party, but also there was a little bit of a somber mood to it because they were mourning the loss of Tuka. It was Tuka's first heavenly birthday, so emotions were really running high. The group decided basically what better day to get their lick back, so to speak, than today. Around 11:30 that night, they caught O.D. Perry, the alleged shooter. They caught him in Parkway Gardens, ambushed him, and shot him several times, including a fatal shot to the neck. This death is what prompted Parkway Gardens, also known as Wick City, to change their name to O Block. And one of the suspected shooters of O.D. Perry was none other than K.I. She was 14 years old at the time. Reportedly, she got on Twitter and she admitted it. She said she was the whole reason there was an O and that she made O Block. And K.I. was also posting on social media with a gun that was stolen from O.D. Perry at the time of his murder. See what I mean when I say the tit for tat? August 8th, 2012, the day before King Von's birthday. Well, this was like at 11:30 at night, so it was almost his birthday. Von was out with his friend Tony Dunn, also known as White White. They made a stop at a convenience store. Von jumped out to grab something out of the store, and when he was gone, a vehicle pulled up to the car and opened fire. There was an officer in the area who actually returned fire and hit the shooter, but they were still able to get away. White White was pronounced dead on King Von's 18th birthday. On his 2020 album, Welcome to O Block, Von has a song that talks about this day. It's the song that today's makeup is based on, Demon, stating that it turned him into a demon to lose his friend like that on his birthday. After that, King Von and his best friend T-Roy got together and, as he put it, started scheming. This was when social media really started to fuel the anger in King Von and T-Roy. It was all fun and games when they were mocking Tuka, but now that people were on the internet mocking White White, they were enraged. Von was especially pissed at K.I. Von and K.I. had an interesting relationship, to say the least. It was a true love-hate relationship, especially in Von's case. Von caught K.I. on a train once and he beat her in front of everybody. And then when he was done, he started tweeting about it, saying that the only reason he didn't shoot her is because there was that officer that was nearby and also a woman from his neighborhood that knew him who was on the train. K.I. responded essentially as if it was true, and she said the only thing that he did to her was put some bruises on her face and that he didn't really do any damage, and then she threatened to put a hole in his face with her .40 cal. So it's safe to say she was pissed that she got beat up on a train in front of everybody and an officer that apparently did nothing. But also, getting beat up is just part of the game. I'm sure it wasn't the first time that happened to her, so it didn't slow her down and it didn't shut her up. During this time, allegedly, King Von was wild. After losing White White, he basically made it his purpose to avenge all the deaths of all the people that he had lost to this lifestyle. I do understand this reaction. I think it's somewhat of a normal reaction to spending your entire life witnessing death and violence, even as a young child, losing people. And most of these murders don't get solved. I heard somewhere, and I can't confirm it, so I don't know if it's true, but I heard that at the time, like 80% of the murders were going unsolved. And some people will resort to street justice if they feel like that's the only justice that they're ever going to get. Now, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that that's what T-Roy and Von decided to do. That was the route that they took. King Von was extremely vocal on Twitter about everything that he was doing. Everything that he was doing. And he was definitely a menace at the time. He would tweet things that it smells like a graveyard outside, or he would tweet that he was about to go to a certain area and that they better clear the block. Tweeting, and I quote, On sight, I'm gon' blast. So he was terrorizing a lot of people, and a lot of people that didn't even have anything to do with this gang war that was going on. Some people were trying to just live normal lives. On October 13th, 2012, 17-year-old Modell McCambry was shot dead while on his way to a girl's house with his cousin. When he was shot, his cousin was literally on the front porch of this girl's house, and he ran down, grabbed him, and was consoling him as he died. While he was holding Modell in the yard, a shooter came up behind him and shot him several times in the back, leaving him paralyzed. Modell was a known associate of Tukaville or STL EBT, the GDs. No one was officially charged with this murder, but later on it was released by the police that T. Roy and King Von were both positively identified as shooters. Von was on Twitter mere minutes after the murder saying that somebody just got killed and it wasn't safe around here. And when I say minutes, I mean like 2 minutes before most people even probably knew there was a murder. The next day, Von was tweeting that him and T. Roy just couldn't stop doing their thing. And then he also mockingly said that he was going to get t-shirts made for Modell's funeral. Even the police had their suspicions about King Von and T. Roy, and they were picked up, but eventually they were released. The police even warned King Von to be careful because when they questioned the Tukaville GDs, they basically stated that they knew for a fact it was King Von and T. Roy. Von took this as more of a compliment than a warning because as soon as he got out, he just hopped back onto Twitter and he was bragging about how his name was ringing in the streets. For years, Von would tweet random GDs on the internet asking them if they had found out who killed Modell and basically just laughing at the way that he died. October 29, 2012, King Von tweeted that he was avoiding T. Roy until he could catch up and to give him until Friday. Allegedly, this is referencing a body count competition that the two of them openly had. Yes, they openly had a competition about who could kill the most people between the two of them, or who could catch more bodies. The very next day, October 30th, 2012, Von tweeted that it was T. Roy's birthday and that he was drilling like OD. Drilling can mean a lot of things, but basically it's just violence against rival gangs, normally shooting. OD is O.D. Perry, who O Block was named after. Less than 30 minutes later, 23-year-old Michael Sullivan, also known as P5, was fatally shot, with King Von tweeting just a few minutes after the murder that, quote, 45th make his ass do 40 flips. Then he tweeted, check the stats, and that was followed by the early bird gets the worm. P5 was killed around 9 a.m. on South Eberhart Avenue. Von wasn't just posting incriminating tweets, but he was also posting a lot of threats. He tweeted that Modell and Crack had got killed in October and to stay tuned to see who would get killed in November. On November 19th, 2012, James Holmes, also known as Lil James, was fatally shot while standing on his porch. Von, just a few hours later, took to Twitter and posted, I be whacking GDs often. Lil James was a known GD. And I can't confirm if this next little bit is true, but supposedly King Von also matched the description of one of the shooters in the actual police report. On the other side, it is a very general description. 5'11", black male, medium build. I feel like a lot of men on the South Side at that time, and probably now, can fit that description. It's enough to make you notice someone, but not enough to make it true. And the tweets didn't exactly make him look innocent, but also it's not real evidence, you know? It was enough to make the police pay attention, and just 3 days after Lil James's murder, Von was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm, and he was actually in jail for over a year for this charge. It seems like the police wanted to keep him locked up while they put together a case, but they were never really able to gather enough evidence to prove anything. So after that charge, the year and some for that charge, he just got released. They held him as long as they could, but they had to let him go. Now, right before Vaughn went to jail for this gun charge, he started having this weird relationship with Ki via Twitter. And I feel fully comfortable saying that this was weird. Like, this was weird. He would flip-flop back and forth between telling her he wanted to murder her and then asking her to be his girlfriend. He would flirt with her, but then he would threaten her. Flirtatious yet threatening. Hell no, doesn't even sound good. When he went to jail, he asked his sister to tell Ki to come visit him, and she never did. When he got out, one of the first things he did was hop on Twitter and tweet her asking her why she never came to see him. Strange. She wasn't going for it though. She didn't really entertain it. It's possible that he was trying to set her up, but it's also possible that he was attracted to her because they lived the same life. She was a shooter, he was a shooter. She enjoyed murder, he enjoyed murder. They were like the same. But also, he said that he wanted to murder her, so she didn't trust it for a good reason. On April 11, 2014, Ki tweeted her location with a devil emoji. She was pronounced dead from 9 gunshot wounds at 5:43 p.m. In the days following Ki's murder, Vaughn, of course, would post incriminating tweets along with mocking her death. He ain't like her. Or did he? Sometimes people want to kill what they're obsessed with, so that's why I can't tell. He also had other members of O Block congratulating him via Twitter on the kill. They never specifically said that, but you can put 2 and 2 together. On one hand, he was retweeting her old tweets. One of them said, "Ops don't get the picture until you put them in the frame." He retweeted that. But then he tweeted after that saying how much he missed her. So I don't know. Vaughn was picked up in connection to Ki's murder, but they eventually let him go because he had an alibi that they couldn't really break. Also, they didn't have any real evidence. This next part is really sadistic and creepy, honestly. In 2019, a documentary called The Secret Life of a Gang Girl was released. This is the one that I was talking about earlier. This documentary was about Ki and her life as a Chicago assassin. I told y'all, Ki was no joke. She was really infamous. And she was a teenage girl. A lot of people could not believe it, but it was true. To everyone's surprise, King Von was featured in this documentary, and he was talking as if he was friends with Ki. I specifically remember him saying he just wanted to. Like, why are you talking about having sex with a dead girl? Even though she was alive at the time, it's like, this is not what we're here to talk about. Shooting, crime, violence, not who you wanted to. Strange. It was just an interesting thing to focus on to me. You can watch it for yourself. There are clips online. It's a little disturbing, especially considering he was the main suspect. Also, it's clear that the filmmakers didn't really do that much background because it was common knowledge that he was a suspect. Like, this was no quiet kept secret. Everybody knew. In May of 2019, King Von ended up at a house party with some rival gang members. Allegedly, he left, and when he returned later, he was with his friend Big Mike. They opened fire on 3 men that were standing out in the yard of this party. 2 of them were rival gang members and the intended targets. The 2 of them took off running, but 19-year-old Malcolm Stuckey was fatally shot. King Von and Big Mike were arrested on 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Von's trial was in November of 2017. His co-defendant, Big Mike, had allegedly struck a deal with prosecution to get less time. So honestly, it wasn't really looking that good for King Von. But at the last minute, Big Mike backed out of the deal. Some witnesses that were supposed to testify dropped out, and one disappeared, just vanished. The entire case that they had against him went to hell, and they had to drop the charges on King Von. By December 2017, Von was a free man. During this time, one of his close friends, Lil Durk, was seeing a lot of success with his music. He was seeing so much success that he was able to create a space for Von in that industry. And he did. Even though initially King Von did not want to rap at all, as soon as he started rapping, people started eating it up. His music felt real and authentic, as it should have. He was out here running wild, and he was writing songs about the life that he was really living. He even goes into detail in some of his music about specific murders that he was the suspect in. King Von bragged in his music the same way he bragged on Twitter. And his unique way of storytelling made him so popular. King Von's track Crazy Story made his career explode, getting like 3 million views on YouTube just in the first week. He started making money, he was booking performances, doing interviews. Von started to take his music a lot more seriously, and he was putting a lot of music out. All of it dissing O-Block rivals and laughing at people he claimed to have killed. In spite of all of the success he was seeing, King Von could not leave his old life behind him. And on February 5th of 2019, along with 3 of his friends, including Lil Durk, King Von shot and robbed a man outside of an Atlanta varsity restaurant. He robbed him for like $30,000, which is a lot to just have on you at the varsity, but that doesn't matter. He went back to Chicago, but he was later arrested on O-Block and sent back to Atlanta to face attempted murder charges. While Durk and Von were awaiting trial because both of them got arrested, they released Crazy Story 2.0, and this got Von even more attention than he was already getting. He was blowing up while behind bars. But that didn't last too long because Durk and Von ended up both posting bail. When he got out, Von threw himself into his rising career. He was doing shows and appearances, just really carving a space for himself inside the music industry. He even started publicly dating rapper Asian Doll. King Von released Welcome to O-Block on October 30th, 2020. This album would be massively successful, but unfortunately, he wouldn't even live to see the first week's numbers. A week after its release, King Von was performing at an Atlanta nightclub called Opium. It was actually his album release party for Welcome to O-Block. After the album release party, they were all supposed to go back to the hotel, but at the last minute, King Von changed his mind and he wanted to go to an after party at the Monaco Hookah Lounge where Quando Rondo was performing. Long dramatic story short, during a split with Asian Doll, King Von supposedly slept with NBA YoungBoy's baby's mother. Quando Rondo was an artist underneath NBA YoungBoy. And supposedly he had a little beef with one of King Von's friends, but nothing too much, honestly. Okay, back to the club. Quando Rondo was performing at Monaco Hookah Lounge. King Von showed up, and basically as soon as King Von saw him, he started swinging, started punching him. I'm not sure if it was like a guilt by association type thing, but Quando Rondo and King Von didn't really have beef. So everyone was just so confused as to what was happening, especially the people that were just walking with Quando Rondo. One minute you're just walking down the street talking to your friend. The next moment he's literally getting beat up by a stranger at this point because no one knew it was Von. Quando Rondo's friend Lil Tim pulled up in a white vehicle, jumped out, and immediately began firing shots into King Von. Officers on the scene ran up and also opened fire. It was so hectic and crazy that initially it was thought that King Von was shot by Atlanta police officers. Supposedly, later on, they ended up proving that it was Lil Tim and not Atlanta police officers. You'll understand why I say supposedly. So shots were just ringing out. People were screaming and scattering, trying to get back into the club, just trying to escape the gunfire. King Von's crew scooped him up, threw him into a car, and rushed him to Grady Hospital. It's been said that King Von was very calm during this car ride to the hospital. He was reassuring everyone that he was gonna be okay and don't cry, don't worry, he was gonna be fine. Unfortunately, that just wasn't true. Dayvon Bennett died at Grady Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia on November 6, 2020. His album was a massive success. It's such a shame that he didn't get to see the fruits of his labor. Lil Tim was arrested, but as far as I know, the charges were dropped and nothing more came of it. If you know something different, please let me know in the comments because I was so surprised at this. This is why earlier I said allegedly they proved that Lil Tim was actually the shooter and not Atlanta Police Department, because that is a theory. Some people do feel that the reason the charges were dropped against Lil Tim is because he's not actually the one who caused the death of King Von. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but I believe it's possible. I mean, I don't know. Do we know anything? I watch enough true crime to know I don't know anything that goes on in the police department during an investigation. Crazy things happen. That was so much to unpack. I was really down a rabbit hole on this one, and I could have gone even further down the rabbit hole, but I was like, I have to wrap this story up. I didn't even touch on all of the connections and speculations and tweets, but the research had to stop at some point, so I had to bring it to a close. I do want to get back to the original question in the beginning of the video. Was King Von Rap's first serial killer? So the definition of a serial killer by Google is a person who murders 3 or more people in a period of over a month with a cooling down time in between murders. I could see why that would apply to King Von, but I also think that that is a very black and white way of looking at like a super gray situation. I think living gang life and being immersed in gang life and in a gang community is so foreign. It's like a different universe to most of us. Now, I'm in no way defending his actions at all. I don't think he's any better than a serial killer or worse than a serial killer. I think they're just very different. When I think of people that kill that are in gangs, the mind and the thought process and what they're doing and why they're doing it seems so very different to me than like a traditional serial killer. On the other side, King Von was 26 when he died. He had made it out. He was getting money. He had a career. Everything was changing for him. But he actively decided to still participate in that type of life and those type of activities, choosing to do something that he really didn't have to do anymore. I think he wasn't far enough removed from his old lifestyle. That type of mentality and those type of actions were so ingrained into his mind that when he would deal with situations, he would revert back to dealing with them the way that he used to. Perfect example was the robbery with Dirk. You have money. Why do you have to rob somebody? So that's what I mean when I say just actively choosing to participate in a life that you don't have to participate. You don't have to rob people to survive, but yet you just want to rob people. I feel like I can understand both sides of the argument, but where I lie, I wouldn't consider him so much as a serial killer. Technically, I could understand and see why people say that, but in my mind, it's just a little different to me. If you've made it this far, I want to know what you think in the comment section. Please remember to give this video a like before you leave. It really helps me out. Please remember to subscribe if you like this type of content or if you like my demon makeup. And I will see you down another rabbit hole.